All right. We are going to pretend like we live in a wonderful future where all of us South Asians show up to everything right on time, down to the second. This is the realm of speculative fiction, so we can speculate and make up wonderful things that perhaps may not be quite true, but we would maybe want to be true down the line. Um, Thank you so much to all of you. My job here is to get out of the way as quickly as possible, but it is very important, I think, for me to say some big thank yous. Thank you to all of you for signing up, for showing up. I said this last week as well, so apologies for repetition for those of you who have been here for both the sessions, but it's amazing to see so many of you have made both the sessions. When we put out the call for our Fiction Fest for 2025, with the theme that we settled on, speculative fiction, we pretty quickly knew that we had hit upon a rich seam, I think, both in the quality and the quantity of the submissions that we received, and also in now the turnout and the interest, and also just the temperature, I think, of the conversations and the emails and everything else that's been flying back and forth. I think that, yeah. We'll hope that speculative fiction's time in South Asia will last for a long time, of course, but I think that now is definitely the time of speculative fiction in South Asia in a way that hasn't been before. So that's really heartening to see. Big thank yous, I think, of course. I want to start with all of the incredible writers who sent us their work. We had really a hell of a time picking six. I think we've picked six extremely special stories, and that's not because we're good at picking them. I think it's because the writers who wrote them are just such incredible writers and so imaginative, but just it was so surprising. And of course, that's the biggest pleasure, I think, of reading speculative fiction. So of course, we've published 4 stories. The 4th one went up today. There are 2 more coming out this week. If you haven't already read those stories, please do. They're all up on our website, and I promise you they are worth your time, and they will blow your mind. A big thank you to all of the writers. Also want to say a big thank you to Anthony Chen, who's a fellow with Himal at the moment. He's been a driving force, if not the driving force, behind all of this. And Shweta, who I will hand you over to briefly. And of course, the Himal team behind the scenes. We really work hard. It's a very small but very special group of people. We sweat and push and try to do way more than I think could reasonably expected of such a small group of people. And I want to say a big thank you to all of them as well. I also have to say that we rely on support from readers and listeners like yourselves to build the future of the magazine, to keep us independent. So please do consider becoming a paying supporter, a Himal patron. That really helps us as we try to keep the fiction fests going and try to keep doing all of those wonderful things, fiction festivals and other things that so many other media and magazines have just given up on. And I also want to say a big thank you today to the folks from the Armory Prize for translation. To those of you who don't know about it, this is a prize that supports translation into English from South Asian languages. We were lucky enough to collaborate with them last year when we had a Fiction Fest looking at translations. We really hope that we'll keep working with them into the years to come, because of course I think translations are going to remain a big part of what we do at Himal and at the Fiction Fest. They will take over the event a little bit later, but I do want to say from everyone at Himal, it's a pleasure as always to be collaborating with the Armory Prize. They will be doing their prize announcement as part of the latter part of this event. And the biggest thank you of the night, I think, is for our incredible panelists. I think that when we were putting together our wish list, we were just throwing out the names we would really love to hear and put together in one place. And all of you said yes. And it's wonderful that way. So thank you so much from me and from the others at Himal. And I'll hand you all over to Shweta, our associate editor, who also anchors our wonderful South Asia review of books. And she'll take things from here.
Thank you, Roman, and welcome everyone. We've got a great lineup of conversations and readings ahead, so I'll keep this very short as well. Today's panel kicks off the second week of Himal's Fiction Fest. This year, we're celebrating Southasian speculative fiction, stories that imagine what the region might look like 100 years from now. You'll find the first 4 short stories from the fest up on our website, and please stay tuned for the final 2 stories coming up this Wednesday and Friday. Like Roman said, for the second year now, we're also so delighted to be joined by the Armory Square Prize for South Asian Literature in Translation. The second half of today's event will feature readings by their shortlisted writers and followed by the announcement of their 2025 prize winner. A few quick housekeeping notes before we get started. This session is being recorded and will be made available on Himal's YouTube channel. Please keep your mics muted unless you're speaking. This helps us ensure that everyone hears the panel clearly. And feel free to use the chat to share thoughts, links, and questions during the session. We'll have a short Q&A at the end. And now on to today's conversation on caste, gender, and resistance in South Asian speculative fiction. We're joined by Bina Shah, the Pakistani writer and author of Before She Sleeps. We have the editors and co-founders of Blaft Publications, Rakesh Khanna and Rashmi Ruth Devadasan, and the independent cultural producer and co-editor of the Blaft book of Anti-Caste SF, R.T. Samuel. And we're also joined by Lavanya Lakshminarayan, the author of most recently Interstellar MegaChef and the Arthur C. Clarke Award-shortlisted book, The 10% Thief. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of today's discussion, Priteegandha Naik. Preeti is a scholar in the field of Dalit Studies and Indian sci-fi, and her work focuses on Dalit futurism and the role of Dalit futures in speculative fiction, art, literature, and film, and their relevance to the anti-caste movement. Thank you all for being here. Preeti, I'll now hand the floor over to you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Shweta. Thank you so much, Roman. I'll just begin. Good evening, afternoon, and morning to all of our visitors here. I am Dr. Priteegandha Naik, and I'm very excited to moderate this discussion on caste, gender, and resistance in South Asian speculative fiction. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. Now, speculative fiction is a beast. It's an umbrella term, and it captures all alternatives and possibilities that realism is not able to. It does not just allow us to imagine alternative futures, but it also helps us to reflect on the injustices and histories that shape our present. Caste, gender, and other intersecting structures of oppression are not just remnants of the past. They are ongoing realities that demand our critical and creative engagement, which I believe speculative fiction does best, but I might be biased. Now, before we begin our discussion, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge the tragic events, especially that took place last week, and observe 2 minutes of silence in memory of those who lost their lives in the tragic Air India plane crash. It's a devastating incident. I also wanted to remember and honor Vaibhav Khandgaye, a brutal reminder that caste-based violence is not a relic of the past, but a continuing crisis. My heart goes out to everyone who's affected by all the wars that are going on currently. So let's hold space for 2 minutes for grief, for remembrance, and for a renewed commitment to justice. Thank you, everyone. I'll just begin with the uh, I'll just begin. So we are thrilled to have this incredibly powerful lineup of creators and publishers who are boldly reshaping how we talk about caste and gender right here in South Asia, especially through a speculative fiction lens. Like Roman mentioned in the last panel, as well as in this panel, speculative fiction is having its moment in South Asia. And for a considerable period of time, realism dominated the representation of these issues in fiction, but speculative fiction has opened up the possibilities as well as the market in incredible ways. Which brings me to the first question for this panel. And the first question is, how do you think, how does caste and patriarchy or caste and gender politics of caste and gender appear in your work or the way that you curate the work? We could start with Bina.
Thank you for the question, and thank you to everybody who's on this panel with me. Thank you to Himal for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here talking about caste and gender. I live in Pakistan, I write in Pakistan, and caste is not the same issue here that it is perhaps in India, for example. We pride ourselves as Muslims about not caring for caste, but its remnants are here. It's something insidious. It's something that does live under the surface. However, it's not the focus of my writing as much as is gender. And I have grown up in Pakistan familiar with and witnessing and hearing about terrible gender-based violence, terrible things being done to women. It took me a long time to understand that it was patriarchy that was the system that allowed these things to happen. And it took about the same time for me to understand that in this country, as in many other Muslim countries, the religion is distorted. The religion is used to excuse terrible crimes, terrible injustice, gender-based, caste-based, all the rest of it. And all of this, you live through this your whole life, and you just have rage all the time. You just have an anger that just permeates everything that you feel and think. And it was when Mona El-Tahawi, the Egyptian-American writer, wrote the essay for, I think it was Foreign Policy magazine, Why Do They Hate Us? About misogyny in the Middle East. It set the world on fire pretty much, or at least the social media world, because all of a sudden everybody was talking about this. Is this true? Why is she saying this? Nobody should say this. This is, dishonorable. It's disloyal. We're already having such a hard time with prejudice from the West or the rest of the world. So why is she bringing attention to this issue? But the question of why do they hate us made me think about the same thing in Pakistan. Yes, sometimes it really feels like women are hated. But that sparked in my mind the question, well, what would they do if we were all gone? What would they do if we just weren't here anymore? How would they handle it? How would they cope? That led me to dream up a world 70 years in the future, post-apocalyptic, post-nuclear war between Pakistan and India, where now that event has taken place, and it has caused a mutation of a strain of cancer that kills women very quickly and very indiscriminately. So the ratio of women to men is drastically reduced, 20 men for every one woman. And I thought to myself, what does that world look like? So playing with that and trying to process and understand the system politically, and also understanding my own anger at being treated this way, at seeing my sisters, seeing, all women treated as second-class citizens. And really, man and woman is also a caste, if you think about it. That's what sparked my need to write this book, which became Before She Sleeps, and after that came a sequel, The Monsoon War. And right now I'm working on the third. And the third one is going to have significant action in South Asia. The first two were more concentrated on sort of the Gulf area, modern day Oman, modern day UAE, modern day, Abu Dhabi. And this one is now going to have quite a lot happening in Sindh of the future, because as you know, Sindh is the southernmost province in Pakistan. And I envision that it is going to be the place that is least affected by the immediate fallout, but because of the Indus River and the effect that such a nuclear war would have on that river. So I want to focus on what effect that would have on the people of Sindh and city of Karachi. So that's where I come from with all of this.
That's incredible to hear. Can we have Rakesh and Rashmi also speak up as publishers, and we can alternate between the authors and the editors and publishers?
Sure. So we kind of got into publishing by accident. I think we started off with an idea of translating some fiction that we were seeing in Tamil that had not been translated into English before, this whole genre of pulp fiction, which included a lot of speculative fiction, although I think the genre boundaries are different in regional languages than they are in English. I think Indian publishing in English has been dominated for a long time by like a small Anglophone urban upper caste minority. And we were interested in, what people were reading that was not getting translated, what people were reading for fun, what people were reading for pleasure. In terms of like caste and gender representation, what we found in pulp fiction was often that there was, a real difference between the novels that were written by men and the novels that were written by women. There was like hard genre boundaries in Tamil and in Hindi, but the readership had a lot more crossover. And then, as part of the publishing project, as our publishing house got older, we started reaching out to people who were doing more experimental and more different things.
But even within pulp fiction, as Rakesh says, that most of the genres, like we felt a lot of the male writers were sticking to, the traditional penny dreadful detective format, where you either have one central detective or you have a detective duo. But there were also, in our second anthology, we also found this amazing horror story written by a woman in the 70s. And that was sort of a one-off that we had. And that we really enjoyed having that translated and having that part of the anthology, because it's a very gritty, very 80s slasher kind of, classic horror set in a hospital, which I think that kind of horror was very popular both in film and in literature in the 70s and 80s.
That's Indumati's story.
Indumati's story, yeah.
She went on to write much more literary fiction, but she had that, I think she wrote that when she was 19. It was good fun.
Yeah, it's, we have asked, I've asked also the translators we've worked with and with the male authors who've recommended other authors to us. And I find this one strange thing, because, and this is with regards to Tamil, I've always asked them, I said, do you know of any other women writers who are your peers who are writing detective fiction or who wrote detective fiction, say, 3 or 4 decades ago? And it's always a no. And I wonder why that is. And hopefully someday we will figure out an answer for that, because it's just curious for me that why is this such a domain of, why it has been such a domain of only male writers.
In Gujarati also, we found Ekta Nirav Doshi, who has made a name for herself as a horror writer. So she does a lot of ghost stories and wrote this amazing story about Bangar. And so there are some exceptions.
Okay. I guess it could also be because of the stereotypes that we all function within. So the socialization that we all have in terms of how we are exposed to only certain kinds of stories and how women should only write these kinds of stories versus how men should write stories.
That anthology, there's a question. The anthology is the Blaft anthology of Tamil pulp fiction. So we came out with 3 volumes. We're talking about volume 2.
Yeah, maybe somebody was writing under a pseudonym, so we could have a George Eliot who's within that, yeah. Any responses to that, Lavanya? You're on mute.
My bad, I'm sorry. So it's interesting that you notice this this absence of women writers in Tamil writing detective fiction, because I find that a lot of that gender essentialism is a lens that is also applied to science fiction. So I write science fiction. And, for the longest time, it was a struggle to find women writing in science fiction in India when I grew up in the 2010s, where we still saw, Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, amazing writers, but not representative of the entire spectrum of what science fiction could be. Mm-hmm. So when I write science fiction, something that I'm very careful to do is to always subvert essentialist notions of what women can be in their relationships to each other, to other men, to technology. And this is something I feel very strongly about. My novel, The 10% Thief, talks about a dystopian meritocracy, and I guess we'll talk about that a bit more through this conversation, but it's one in which women who demonstrate toxic masculinity are successful, because it is an intersection of, the expectations of society under the umbrella of techno-capitalism. And that leads to very interesting perspectives on what women can be. Even my new novel, Interstellar, MegaChef, kind of delves into this. Is there a fundamental goodness to women? Are we really wholesome, nurturing caregivers? I don't think so. I think women can be anything and write about anything. And this is something that finds its way through all of my work. I've published a number of short stories, and this is something I tend to talk about a lot. Additionally, growing up in India, caste is part of our cultural identity, the oppression and the oppressive systems that we live within. Now, I come from caste privilege, but this does not mean I'm unaware of it and that I am absolutely, I'm 100% on board affirmative and supportive action of all kind to sort of undo these centuries of oppression. And this is also something that tends to find its way into my work. Now, it might not be a direct mirror, the way realist fiction might be a mirror, but it does find its way into my work in the way, say, discrimination is carried out. My latest book is about food cultures and the clash of food cultures. And if we look at present-day India, the almost militant enforcement of vegetarianism is a form of caste oppression, among many other things. And that political debate is something that I take into this completely secondary world. It's set in the far future. It's 2,000 years in the future. But there are still fundamental ideological differences in the way food is consumed and represented. And I wanted to talk about this, but, placing it in the realms of speculative fiction, where you don't have to have an apples to apples direct comparison, but you can still showcase the same kinds of problems that we see in today's reality in completely disconnected realities altogether. And that's kind of where I come from as a writer, looking at mirroring present day disparities, usually at the intersection of various power dynamics between capitalism and technology and gender.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that answer. So I'm going to take advantage of this extremely diverse panel and ask questions individually as well. And one of the first ones that I want to ask is to Aarti. So, Arti, in your introduction in the Blaft book of Anti-Caste SF, which is amazing, by the way, I have highlighted so many sections of it. You write that Ambedkar's writing is, quote, speculative in the truest sense of the word. What if everything you've been taught about yourself and your origins is wrong? What if you could defy millennia of tradition, thought, and preordination to make your world anew and leap into the future? What an incredible thought. This is absolutely brilliant and enlightening because this forwards an idea that Dalit speculative fiction can reclaim and redefine spaces. So, how do you navigate writing about caste from an insider's perspective while working in a genre that is in such a historical manner shaped by dominant caste or Western tropes?
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for everyone who's here listening in and the rest of the panel too. Like, I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. I think how I would, well, first of all, I don't write fiction. I kind of only do like nonfiction work and a lot of like production and curation. So, I think for me, there's the other important thing to note is that I'm a political science major with all of the kind of pontification that entails. I think that the thing about Ambedkar, what I meant about him being speculative or his writing being speculative in the truest sense, was in the way that like Aristotle like was speculative, like in the way that Plato's Symposium is speculative. Like he's a political thinker. And so the worlds that he's crafting and the things that he's talking about, it's like kind of a thought experiment, right? You're like it's to get people into the practice of thinking and questioning, like you said, these like sort of dominant narratives. And of course, like he was writing in like what the 1930s and 40s and 50s. So the fact that everything that he wrote is still like so prescient, that says, I think, equally as much about the kind of conditions he was writing about, as well as kind of like, how formidable like his mind was as a thinker. And I also think that if you look at then Dalit writing, it's not necessary that it's reclaiming all the time or resisting all the time. Like I think what's truly extraordinary, like if you look at like, the work of someone like Bama and or you look at even like one of the stories that this person Nabi Haider Ali wrote in our book, or Hamida Khan, who wrote this like lovely story, they are like set in like they are kind of reflecting, they're just writing stories. They're sort of like I think an author, like their first allegiance, and I'm sure you guys would agree, is like to tell a good story. And so it's not necessary that Dalit writers are always like thinking about like this sort of like, being oppressed all the time. And I think that's where a book like ours, where we kind of thought very hard about, maybe the kind of prompts we wanted to give out, the kind of people we approach. So from our commissioning process and the way that we approached people, we wanted to sort of give them the freedom to be able to really write, to be writers first rather than Dalits first.
Yeah.
Right? Or women or queer people or like thing. And because we did that, I think we sort of ended up having it be so widely representative of so many things that like there's so much of stuff that it's like talking about like disability politics, right? There's so many things that we just absolutely, we did not plan to have that many, like I guess, trans themes, like we didn't plan a lot of that because we weren't trying to fill like a certain like quota, if I might like use that term kind of ironically, just because we went story first. And the other thing that was really important was in terms of like how we approach the older or the more already kind of established writers who had, and I think we've all talked about how there's so much of like, emphasis on realist fiction. If you, and what I've when I wouldn't put um I wouldn't put upper caste publishing and Western publishing in the same brackets at all. Like I don't think they're like oppressive in the same way. And like in for a lot of like Dalit people, including myself, like Western publishing in English literature and the English language has been like a mode of freedom and has been a path to mobility. And
Yeah.
so it has like in the way that like frankly like upper caste culture society, whatever else you want to call it, is absolutely not. It's an escape from that. So I wouldn't put them in the same class at all. I wouldn't even put them in the same, what do you say, like intellectual space. Um, the thing which is amazing if you see just like Western publishing is how famous authors are given so many opportunities to go into new mediums and to like explore new um genres, right? Like there's so many people who write a book and then they get to write a film, or they write a game and then they get to write a book. They get to score music, they get to adapt their own works into opera, they get to like really transcend like genre and medium. And if you look at the sort of Indian publishing scene, I think it's absurd that, and I mean, Rakesh and I, Rashmi, like we thought it was absurd that no one had thought to commission like Bama or Gogi Shamila in writing like speculative fiction, or asking them to like inviting them to curate their own anthology. So you really have to like think about like I guess the decades of like editors who, even if they're like congratulating themselves in the fact that they're like translating and marketing and lifting up that to Dalit voices, they're only seeing them in these categories, right? Like and I think the role of an editor is to really push and invite and kind of really get into that sandbox with the creative people. And I think that's really where the speculation also came from our part, because I think the three of us, like how I said that the writers have to be writers first. Like I think for us as editors, we had to like be fans first. And like that's kind of what we came, like especially like when I first met Rakesh, like we spent like a good month, the first month of like getting to know each other, just talking about all the speculative fiction that we were into and just nerding out over books. And even when I visited like Rakesh and Rashmi, wall to wall with books with my sister, we just spent the whole afternoon talking about books that we love. So that's why, like, I guess, of course, this book is always like, put together with words like resistance and oppression and rebellion and subversion. But for us, it was so purely fun, a lot of it. And yeah, so I think that's really what I think that's how I would answer the question.
Thank you for that. And that also brings me to Rashmi's book, Kumari Loves a Monster, which is, again, it's absolutely amazing because you defy all genre conventions. You combine art, you combine poetry, you combine romance, all through speculative fiction. So how does this assemblage, which is it's right with satire, it's right with like this incredibly different type of aesthetics, how does this challenge gender hierarchy according to you? And how do you leverage visual storytelling? How does visual storytelling alter the contours of speculative fiction, especially in a way that is not available to the written word?
So with regards to Kumari, or KLM as we call it, so that came out in 2007. I was a much younger person then, 2009. I have always loved, not always actually, I grew up reading a lot of graphic novels and graphic fiction. I think in my late 20s and 30s, when suddenly, Joe Sacco was available, all the Marvel graphic novels, the intense ones about Batman were available. So suddenly there was this boom of, comics that weren't just Archie and Tinkle and ACK that you could get. And that completely blew my mind. And it introduced me to a whole different kind of graphic narrative. Also, the idea of comics, where it was not just for a page divided into 4 panels, or a linear telling a linear story. When we worked with Sham who is the artist behind all the images in Kumari Loves a Monster, and the artist who has done the seminal painting of the woman with a gun, the woman drinking blood out of the skull, and the cybernetic woman for Tamil Pulp Fiction Volume 3. Sham is one of the most interesting people and the most prolific artists I have ever met. He's based out of Chennai, and he's been illustrating for all the Tamil, Telugu, and Malayalam magazines of different publications for more than quarter of a century. And I had this idea, and Bina, I just want to know, I was just hanging on to every word you were saying, because so much of what you said resonated with me, especially about rage and about women. Kumari, in some ways, was born. I worked in the Tamil film industry as well for a decade, and the idea was kind of to mess with the idea of cishet romance, and these picture perfect moments of what we see as both, I think, romantic fiction and films has taught us about love, and not have a man and a woman, but have a woman with a monster who can be, and the monster is anybody you can imagine. And I was also very clear that the woman would take the lead in a lot of these situations. So there's one picture where the monster is sitting and being carved by a woman sculptor, because we have, all these images as, the woman is the muse, and she's just languishing on a couch or something, eating grapes, or, holding a couple of lotuses in her hand. And I wanted to subvert that. And again, the famous, bathing scene where in the old Tamil films of the 80s, the village belle in the, in the lotus pond. I wanted to sort of flip that narrative where the woman is giving the monster a bath in this beautiful, idyllic lotus pond. So I think a lot of it came from, I asked Sham, do you want to do this? And he initially thought I was crazy, but he liked the idea, and he said, sure, let's do it. And we would sit and we would discuss, and we would come up with these different situations. And, the young woman taking her partner out on a TVS 50, where she's not passive. Basically, in this romance, in each of those pictures, the Kumari is not passive. She is taking the lead. She is deciding what they're doing. And in one, she's educating him also. And, she says that love is not enough for me. You must also learn your ABC. So she wants, and, in another place, they're in a library. So it was just
amazing.
It was just, different situations where it's not, the woman is saying, like, we need to do more with this romantic relationship of ours. In one, they're doing karate together, and in another, they're doing household chores together, because she's like, things go faster when people do this together. So also the notion of, the
Partnership.
A romance is a partnership, especially if you two happen to be living together. And the style was done, it had this bright pink cover, because it was, again, riffing off the, the wedding albums that were very popular at the time in, the 80s and early 90s, with the gold foil and the little die cut where you could see the couple together. So that's where this came from. And I had hoped at that time to do a series, which would be, so we had KLM, Kumari Loves a Monster, and I wanted to do Kumaris in space and Kumari's action hero. So I'm still hoping at some point I could do both of those as well.
Someone noticed that it's sold out on our website, and we are planning a reprint for later this year. Meanwhile, the ebook is available.
Yeah. I would definitely pre-order it. Which also brings me to what Lavanya was also saying, that we are such an incredible, whether we are editors or whether we are writers or whether we are just doing non-fiction or fiction, identity is such an important part of the way that we produce our work. So, and your work, especially the 10% Thief, or as I read it, analog/virtual, it discusses like a caste. It gamifies meritocracy basically, right? And you look at it from you look at caste as in a corporate capitalist setup. So, I also wanted to ask you, other than this, how did your own identity make you look at caste as both privileges and discrimination? Because the book has both. You represent both in vastly different ways. So how have your lived experiences also influenced the book?
Thank you for that question, Preeti. So I am a game designer. I've worked in the gaming industry for a while. When I wrote the book, I think it was probably around 7 or 8 years when I started thinking about the book. I'd been working in gaming for that long. And using the lens of my experiences working with absolutely cutting edge technology, right? Like if we're talking about the looming threat of AI here today, 10 years ago, we were already dabbling in machine learning in gaming, in very different contexts, of course, than the current ethical muck that is AI. But while I was working in gaming, it gave me a lot of insight into the kind of technological disparity that we have in the world today. Now, this is even before the pandemic. Now, during our lockdowns and the COVID disaster, we saw tech disparity and its far-reaching consequences hit the entire country, right? But we saw kids being unable to access smartphones, therefore not being able to go to school, digital transactions when it came to, I guess purchasing power was kind of gated by, do you have a smartphone with Google Pay on it or not? But hints of this extreme were already being witnessed by me as I worked in the gaming industry. I had access to all of this stuff. I mean, we're talking the Oculus and VR and everything else imaginable. And I was using all of this to make entertainment, presumably for also privileged people who have access to all of this technology. But at the same time, I'm sitting there acutely aware that when demonetization happened, it affected the lives of so many people who didn't have access to those smartphones. I saw so many people I knew struggling with that. Now, that is one lens through which this book was informed. But I think on a couple of other axes, right? Now, corporate life is treated like a meritocracy. It is an unapologetic meritocracy. And this is an enormous fallacy that we are sold this myth that people who deserve it and who work hard will succeed. That has, it's a myth that never accounts for people who begin unequally in this world, people who begin from a position where they cannot access so many privileges, including the privilege of, let's say in the context of writing and publishing, looking at the world today, being able to read and write in English, right? And all of this also in turn impacts the ability to use technology, because our default languages are English. And even if, there's translation into other languages, you might not be able to read and write. So kind of, from this very zoomed out perspective of the enormous imprint that technology has on our lives, to asking questions about who actually gets to access it and who gets to use it and towards what end. I started kind of thinking about this and delving into this, really, because if we look at so much technology being sold to us, it is being sold to us very top down from capitalist structures in Silicon Valley. And, that is not necessarily technology that is actually useful or accessible to entire millions of people around the world, including in India. And sort of viewing that disparity between me and the Oculus at the office and people who didn't have a smartphone and therefore weren't able to access Google Pay and everything in between, that sort of set off this need to represent this, and told through, of course, the big lie that is meritocracy in The 10% Thief. Bangalore is a city-state. It's run by a corporation, and everybody is graded on a bell curve based on their productivity, where their productivity signifies their worth to society. And it's unforgiving and ruthless. So you have your top 20% who have limitless privilege. You have the middle 70% who live comfortable lives, and the bottom 10% are routinely deported. They're kicked out of the city. They have no access to electricity or running water or any technology. And once you hit that bottom 10%, you and all of the people who are going to come after you, you are just condemned to being analogs. It is an extreme version of how meritocracy is a flawed idea, and a dangerous idea. And, so it's a combination of all of these things that I decided to throw together into one book, told from 20 different perspectives, because I wanted to capture the breadth of the impact of this idea in terms of the conditioning it takes to buy into it, and then to strive to, constantly compete for privilege, but also in the depths of despair that it can lead people to, potentially the coming together of a sensibility of community and questioning and rebellion and resistance. So it's a book that does a lot of things.
Yeah, thank you. Talking about environments and the social conditions, it brings me to Bina's work, wherein in an earlier question, in an earlier meeting, you also mentioned how the cultural and religious imagery has also definitely influenced the way that you produce your work, the sort of representation that you have in your work. So I wanted to hear your thoughts regarding that, if you could just elaborate on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I thought that putting something that happens 50 years from now, 70 years from now, 100 years from now is a great way to escape and to free myself as a writer from the constraints that one might have if you're doing realistic fiction. Well, I've got to get everything absolutely accurate. I've got to show how the religion is practiced by 10 different types of characters. I've got to show the effect of the culture on all these characters. And I thought, what if I just blow it all up? What if I just say that after this war, everybody stops being religious, everybody stops being, and I mean, can you imagine a South Asia without religion? But I thought to myself, why not?
Not at all, but yeah, that's
well, that's the thing, right? But I did that for a very practical reason, because I thought if I start writing things about religion, which I've always tried to stay away from, but not always managed to, I'm going to get people after me and saying, why did you write this? Why did you write this? This is blasphemous. This is, hurting my feelings. This is hate speech. So I said, fine, just get rid of all the religion, call everybody just a post-religious and be done with it. And then see where it takes me. And I did that. And at the same time, I held on to ethnicity. So the characters in Before She Sleeps, they are of South Asian descent. There's somebody that's of, like Gulf Arab Khaliji descent. There is somebody who's Levantine. There's somebody who's Sephardic Jewish. So I kept those things there as signposts to the cultures that we knew or that we know in our present time, but we leave them behind in the future. The South Asian character, I do something really interesting with her in that before she comes into the world of the speculative fiction arena that I create, she has a tussle with her mother about wearing a nose pin. And that's a total callback to South Asian culture and to Sindhi culture, where when you get married, then you wear the nut. And that's sort of your marker into womanhood, from girlhood to adulthood. So I wanted those markers in there, and I wanted to put things in there that would make people go, oh, I know that. I recognize that. I get it. So 70 years, 100 years in the future, we've left a lot of things behind, and what endures. So I was doing it in that sort of way. And then when I get to the second book, to the Monsoon War, I just want to say that, you were talking, Rashmi, about subversion and rage and things. So I imagined, and I was inspired by if you followed ISIS, what it was doing in Iraq and Syria in the 2010s, and the Kurdish women put up a resistance unit to ISIS, and they were actual fighters. They were walking around with automatic weapons, and they were fighting side by side with the men. And I thought, how inspirational is that? And that is really how to take on patriarchy. What if you do it through militant feminism? So I came up with the idea of a woman army, and they are sort of a guerrilla army. They live in the mountains in the south of Oman, which is a province called Dhofar, and they go to war. And I just wanted to show that women, and this was the real life example. I studied, I researched women fighters in Colombia, the guerrilla fighters in Colombia. I read about the Kurdish women who fought ISIS. I read about other types of Marxist and revolutionary women. And I made them fierce, and I made them bloodthirsty, and I made them as just happy to kill and rejoicing when they killed and all that, just to say, we are women, we know blood. We see blood. We're not afraid of it. We're not these little sort of, in the first book, the women were put on a pedestal as these mothers of the future nation, and they're to be respected, but actually they're being completely abused. The second book was a total, let's kick patriarchal ass, but let's do it in a way that's familiar to the Middle East, to the Kurdish resistance, and again, outside of the normal Islam, because most of the Kurdish women are not Muslim, they're Yazidis. So getting rid of the culture, getting rid of religion freed me in a way that I could take everything, mash it up, mix it up, make a real sort of just a history out of everything, and come up with something really pure and something really beautiful, which was solidarity between women. And in the third book, I'm going to explore. So the first book was really about how do women live in most unthinkable kind of patriarchy. How do they survive? The second book was how do women take up arms and fight against that patriarchy and die and live and die? And the third book is going to sort of conclude that, well, the answer to defeating patriarchy is in a kind of techno-feminism that I see taking root all across the global South. And I'm going to talk a lot about that, and I'm going to sort of present that. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a Cyborg Manifesto, which I was just made familiar with by a very good friend of mine, Claire Chambers. And I read that, and she's saying, Donna Haraway saying, well, yes, women are cyborgs, but there's nothing that really unites women. And I said, no, this is because you are not studying the global South. And the thing that unites everybody who is a woman or queer, non-binary, whatever, is the gender-based violence that we face. It's ruthless. It's a disease. It's as much of a disease as was COVID, and patriarchy is our biggest religion in this part of the world. So, and I think the great equalizer is technology. So that's going to be my proposal, my sort of final statement to all of this.
It's actually incredible because the books have also grown, and so has the industry, which also brings me to Rakesh as an editor and as a publisher. How what trends have you observed over the past few years now, and how does writing from the margins sort of change the literary and the publishing landscape?
Yeah, so one thing that I've been thinking about is that this word margins, writing from the margins and marginalized voices, is, I think that word comes from like America and the UK, where it makes more sense because in the US and the UK, like the majority demographic is also the economically and socially dominant one, right? So there's a need for publishers to like boost the voices of the various oppressed minorities who are on the margins. But in India, it's like the dominant voices, at least in publishing, it's a little bit different in like, maybe a little bit different in film and like somewhat different in politics, but economically and definitely in publishing, the dominant voices are this really small upper caste Anglophone minority, right? And maybe it's not really the voices from the margins that need boosting as much as the voices from the middle of the page, like people who are, speaking and writing in Indian languages, like Bangladesh, Dalit, Adivasi people who make up, there's different, ways to, there's different estimates of how many people are this caste, upper caste, and lower caste. But like, it's something around 70% of the country is, Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi, not upper caste writers. And that 70% is vastly underrepresented in publishing in general, especially in English publishing, and especially in speculative fiction. So that was the point behind, Arti Samuel, when they joined Blaft, like we were discussing that issue and trying to boost that representation, and then looking at what was already there, we found a bunch of writers who had already been working, who had not been translated or had not been translated very much, like P.A. Uttaman in Malayalam, so that project was really, really interesting in terms of just finding what was already out there, and then as they said, like, find encouraging authors like Bama and Gogu Shamla, who are like really well-known icons of Dalit literature in Tamil and Telugu, to try their hand at speculative fiction. So that anthology was just tons of fun to put together.
Yeah, Bama's work, The Phantom Ladder, I think in that book is absolutely.
That's Gogu Shamla.
Oh, yeah, Gogu's. Yeah. So that's also incredible because when we traditionally think of science fiction, we think of cyborgs and we think of alternative timelines and we think of alternative worlds. And she is actually writing about the concept of science, which is I think very prescient in our current times. So I think, which brings me, I think, to the last question for this session. If for all of us, science fiction and the way that we approach science fiction, speculative fiction, it's so different, right? Like we all came to it from different ages, from different genders, from different identities. So if you could reimagine one key aspect of caste or gender relations in the future through speculative fiction, what would it be and how would it look like? Because science fiction, speculative fiction, the way that it is traditionally defined in the Western world, in the Western scope, in the global North, is very different from what we are doing right now, what we are writing, what we are researching, what we are reading. So what possibilities do you think this medium could give your work, which you have not explored till now? We could just, it's open to the entire panel, so anybody can just start.
I missed the question. Could you repeat that? I crashed I'm sorry, Pakistani internet.
Okay, no, I was just asking that, we all come to science fiction and speculative fiction from very different locations. We come like gender locations, caste locations, all sorts of experiences that we've had. the way science fiction and speculative fiction is being defined in the global north is very different from the way that we are approaching it. We are researching, we are writing, reading, all of it is very different. So what possibilities do you envision to represent caste or gender or even resistance in speculative fiction that you have not explored till now, and how would you take it ahead? Lavanya? Okay, Bina, anybody, it's like a cross-panel thing, so anybody can start.
I think we kind of did that in the anthology. Like, I mean, when I was like, I started reading speculative fiction when I was like 14, and I kind of, I was reading like Philip Pullman and a lot of graphic novels, also like Rashmi, a lot of like superhero stories, and like you sort of see the kind of religious, whether it's like Amar Chitrakarta or like Chota Bheem or whatever, like there's even that like anime version of the Ramayana, like that film. There's so many like weird things that people are like pushing onto kids in South Asia. And like I think even in like, so for me, like speculative fiction was just this like world where anything was possible. And it like also like, as a kid, you kind of want a world where adults don't have so much like power over you, because they're always like getting in the way and like, making you go to sleep or like eat vegetables or, not stay up reading, like prevent you from having fun. Whereas like, I think the main thing about and another thing that gets a lot of bad rep or is not seen as literary is like young adult fiction. And so much of it is like, like an adult can't really tell you what to do if you can like do magic or if you have a dragon or essentially like have like a superpower. And so like I think at that level it's a way of I think that's a lot of like how a lot of kids get into speculative fiction. But then it's also really unfortunate, I think, because it's not as though speculative fiction is like a perfect genre or kind of publishing or literary culture on its own. There's like so much of sexism and racism and like within just like the authors and the fans or like the comic cons and stuff. So I think, like I would just like for there to be like an explosion of new media, right? Like, and I think nowadays, like, there is so much more you can do with like the written word because of the internet. But I hope that we also get like, I hope we're going towards a place where people can also like make films a lot more cheaply. Because I think, we spoke about like the kind of visual element of speculative fiction, because like, yeah, when I was 14, I was reading all of these like, Wizard of Earthsea and like Alana, like Tamora Pierce, and of course like Harry Potter, and regardless of whatever's going on now. But like I also was watching The Matrix. So I guess for me, like if we could not just in like the like literature aspect, if we see like a lot more like films and TV shows that are not like made by like Netflix, like I think that would be really incredible and just like a new economy, really. And I think that's kind of what I would want there to be, like not so much like a hegemony of like these 5 big publishers, but really like a genuine kind of shift in distribution and production, I think, of culture.
I think we have Rashmi, who could possibly head that revolution as well, since she's worked in the film industry. So,
Yeah,
I would like to. Oh, I'm sorry, Rashmi. I didn't.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
No.
Also, I think we need like a Main Matters film.
This is Rashmi's story in the Blaft Book of Anti-Caste SF. It's called Meat Matters. It's a Chennai-based zombie story.
Yeah. So I think Rashmi, I think the ground is absolutely fertile right now to start producing whatever it is that you have in your mind right now.
Yeah, I mean, film is a hard one. It, I'm curious to see because I think, like as Ria said, just before the pandemic, Netflix India, Amazon India was just coming in, and everybody thought that was going to revolutionize everything. And apart from the legacy film production houses, both in Bollywood, Collywood, Tollywood, there would be this new sort of
Production. Yeah.
product. There would be this new way to make films. There would be this other alternative, and it just hasn't happened because it's again these companies are going to these to these legacy directors, to these legacy production houses, and that's where the money is going. So the revolution that we thought was coming has not really, and it's and people who are not making cinema at that level, who are not doing something mainstream, you get labeled as oh, that's the documentary space. So you get pigeonholed into either you're doing documentary or you're doing movie type films. So there's everything is sort of put in a jar. And I think what Ria says, there has to be a way to tell interesting stories that doesn't, that for the creator, for the director, for the writer, for everybody involved, where you get to pay everyone and you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, do I need to, sell off an internal organ to make this film? Because I saw this even while I worked in the industry, that any person who had an alternative story or a different kind of story, there's very little space to hold that and the funds to make that happen. And definitely, I hope that we're still waiting for that shake-up to happen. I mean, when I started in the film industry, I was 21 when I got my first job, and I'm now speaking to especially younger women filmmakers, screenwriters, and I feel like it's really moved. It's like an inchworm, but everyone says, oh, but there are more women in India in film, in writing, in cinematography. Yes, but compared to it's really a drop in the ocean.
And it's weird because, like, the last female-fronted action movie in Tamil is like Vijay Shanti IPS, which is a huge hit, and like nobody's tried to do it since then. I mean, there's not many yet.
But yeah, like this is a separate, I could go off on this tangent for a very long time. But yeah, I'm hopeful too, like Ria, that there will be a space, in the visual medium that people can do more interesting things.
Yeah. Bina?
So, sorry again. And I wanted to go back to your question about how we're situated, how we came to this type of writing through where we're situated. And for me, it was very easy because I call myself, and this is true, I am a child of dictatorship. So I grew up in the Pakistan of General Zia. And it was probably the most, it was extremely repressive. It was a very authoritarian and it was a very Islamic oriented dictatorship. It was not Islamist or Islamic, I don't even know. But again, more distortion of the religion to justify the taking away of people's human rights and agency and toppling a government and so on and so forth. All you had to do was say it is un-Islamic, and immediately there would be people ready to do whatever needed to be done. So as I was growing up in that environment, and his regime started from 1977 all the way up until 1989, 1978 to 1989, that's 11 years. And while I was growing up in that time, I came across George Orwell, 1984. And I read it, and I did read it in 1984, although I don't think I really understood all of it. And I've read it time and time again. And the thing that it said to me was, oh, this is exactly like where I am right now. But this is the future, but it's my present. So I think that it was the book that shaped my sensibilities about resisting authoritarianism, resisting dictatorship, resisting the complete control of your mind and your thoughts and your, and I grew up in a very repressive environment, not just politically, but again, gender-wise. And it made me understand that that there's I don't have a lot of freedom around me physically, but there's freedom in my mind. My mind is free. There's freedom in the intellect. And I think that it totally affected me as a person. And then it also affected the type of things that I wrote later on in my life.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Lavanya?
Yeah, so to kind of, I think your the last question that you asked, right? What are you going to do that you haven't done yet, or what would you like to see? I think it's so. I think it's all a matter of degrees, really, because we write from the spaces we write from, and we experience reality in those spaces. And so as we grow as people, we choose to focus on one aspect a little bit more, or another aspect a little bit more. And I think as far as my work goes so far, looking at these intersections of technology with different points of identity, or identities at different intersections of social reality, I think that is something that I enjoy and I would love to continue to explore. It's just that I might choose to lay emphasis on different aspects of identity across different pieces of work. So, looking at The 10% Thief, it's a mosaic novel, so I have 20 protagonists, all occupying different spaces. My new book, Interstellar, MegaChef, is set in a queer normative far future. And so we're looking at a very different structure for society. In fact, it attempts to be incredibly egalitarian, but discrimination still persists on different axes. And so I think, it's hard to think of what one would do next, because that's like thinking about my next book, which I haven't had the time to do yet. But I genuinely feel like all of these aspects of reality that we mirror, for me personally, I would like to continue mirroring them, except maybe in different dimensions or aspects of these, because this is where I come from. I want to write about my experiences as a South Asian, as an Indian, as a woman living in India. And I also want to do it from the perspective of the fact that there can be multiple possibilities when it comes to what Indianness comprises, what being South Asian comprises. There is no one set definition. I think Arti mentioned earlier, right? Sometimes you just want to write stories that are stories for the love of them. And that is also possible. So, without getting literal about notions of India, about notions of South Asia, I think that is something that I want to do more and more of. I think my first book being very rooted in Bangalore, the second one kind of being in space in the far future. I want to continue to, go down that road a little bit, where a thing can be Indian even if it doesn't hit check boxes of Indianness as they're held in the popular imagination.
Yeah. That's actually, I'm looking forward to everything that all of you are going to produce. And those are my last set of questions. I think, Shweta, we can open it for the question answer round now. Thank you so much, because this was an incredible conversation. I have learned a lot, and I hope everyone who has joined has also learned or opened up the possibilities to multiple things. And thank you.
Thank you, Preeti. We'll now open the floor up for a quick round of audience questions. Please feel free to raise your hand and we'll spotlight you, or you can drop them below in the chat. So we already have one question from Peter Griffin. Would the panel care to recommend new writers who are doing good work in the broad area of the subject of this discussion? Who would like to take that one first?
I can go with a few recommendations. There's Tashan Mehta, there's Sharanya Manivanan, and there are a ton of incredible short story writers being published in magazines. Arula Ratnakar pops into my mind. Shreyaila Anasuya, who has just announced a new book, her first book. So these are people I would keep an eye out for. I think Archita Mitra, all wonderful writers writing from different parts of India. Many of them have written short stories. All of them, all the ones I've mentioned so far are women because, I also feel the need to spotlight that there are women writing science fiction and speculative fiction in a world where that's heavily male dominated and very bro, and so I would strongly recommend all of their work.
I would also recommend the Blaft book because it's a piece
Absolutely.
of fiction. Yeah, it's a piece of fiction that's completely different from I guess the general SF novels that we read, and I'm a huge fan. Thank you, Rakesh, and the team who came out with that book because it's absolutely incredible work.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I mean, I have to recommend everybody who's in our anthologies. A lot of them are writing non-speculative fiction also. Like R.T. Samuel's been writing all these nonfiction essays, and Snehashish has been writing a lot of nonfiction. But some of them have more short stories coming out. I think Kamida Khan has more stuff in the works, and Gitanjali Joshua, and lots of other people. I'll recommend another author on our list, Kurili Monica Vale, who writes really out there, often speculative fiction, which does talk a lot, especially about like sort of economic inequalities, and draws on her very colorful background, being born in Canada and then moving to Chidambaram in her teenage years. We've been reading a lot of African writers also. There's a writer from Botswana named Lolo Samase that I've been really into. She's got a novel called Womb City, and it's a little bit like a lot of her work is sort of drawing on some of the ideas in the movie Get Out, but also like The Matrix, and it's kind of this crazy cyberpunk stuff. It's really good.
I think for zines, you can start with Himal itself. Like, I think that would be the best starting point for any magazines and any literary websites. I think Himal is the best way to get into the space.
So in Pakistan, spec-fic is really, really just, it's in kindergarten right now. But there is an annual award. It's called the Salam Award for speculative fiction. And they have a website. They don't publish a zine or anything. They haven't got things in print, but they have a website, and they've published on that website the winners for each year, the shortlisted people. So exploring that I think would be really cool, because that's where you really see the newest of the new. But spec-fic, again, like I said, it's just starting to take root in Pakistan. Our life is so weird already. We just don't think about writing about more weird things.
We have a question from Aina Singh. Lavanya, will we see a sequel to Analog Virtual, or is that where we leave the story?
Thank you for that question, Aina. So there could be a potential sequel. It's just that after I wrote the book, which was disturbingly prescient when we went into lockdown, and experienced the lockdown. Now, the reality I envisioned in the book was something I thought we were still a few decades away from. And the book was a bit of a warning. Seeing that unfold the year the book released in India as analog virtual, which is how everyone in India has read it, was so fundamentally disturbing and such a deep and dark journey for me to go on, to think that this implausible, horrific future I'd imagined was on our doorstep. I quickly shelved any exploration of a sequel, because I couldn't bring myself to, sort of reconcile the fact that it was reality and such immediate reality. So I can't confirm that I will write it. There are directions it could go in, but I don't know if I actually have the strength in me to go into writing it again after what the world lived through with the pandemic.
Thank you again, Preeti, for expertly guiding the conversation. And a big thank you to our panelists for a truly fantastic conversation. I'll now hand over to Anthony to intro the Armory Square Prize team.
Hi, everyone. Thank you once again to Priti and all the panelists. I personally learned a lot from today's session, and thank you to everyone attending. My name is Anthony, and I'm an editorial fellow here at Himal. We're now going to shift gears into the second part of our event for the night. We're holding tonight's event in collaboration with the Armory Square Prize for South Asian Literature and Translation. This is our second year partnering with Armory Square Prize, who will present the shortlisted candidates and winner for their prize during tonight's event. Without further ado, I will hand the floor over to Jason and Pia from the Armory Square Prize team. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anthony. And I want to give a big thank you to the entire team at Himal South Asian for the kind invitation to have us back to take part in the Himal Fiction Fest this year as well, for the Armory Square Prize for South Asian Literature and Translation, shortlist and winner announcements. So let me just say a few words about the Armory Square Prize. It's the third year of the prize, and it was created to inspire new directions for translators into English from one of the most diverse, historically complex, and culturally vibrant regions of the world. It awards an exceptional translator of South Asian literature into English with the publication of their outstanding manuscript by Open Letter Books, with all shortlisted translators' work published by Words Without Borders, the premier journal for international literature. And before we start with the shortlist and winner announcement, I'd like to hand it over to Pia Sawhney, co-founder of Armory Square Ventures and one of our jury members.
Yes, yes. Hi, thank you, Jason. It's my pleasure to be here with you and our jury to announce this year's shortlisted winner again of the Armory Square Prize. It's third year running. And thank you also once again to Himal South Asian. As Jason mentioned, I'm Pia Sawhney. I'm co-founder and partner emeritus of the venture capital firm Armory Square Ventures. We administer and sponsor the Armory Square Prize each year. A little bit about Armory Square Ventures. We're a mission-focused technology venture capital firm that strives to be a community catalyst in the regions where we operate. We aim to identify innovators today that will lead us toward a brighter, more humane tomorrow. And as such, ASV is an optimism engine for ecosystems outside Silicon Valley, supporting B2B, AI, and tech-enabled software startups to source talent, resources, and capital. And our focus lies in places overlooked by other investors. This prize is something we launched to really showcase the breadth and depth of literary talent from the Indian subcontinent and South Asia. And it's our utmost aspiration that we continue to cultivate this ecosystem in the years and decades to come. It's been our pleasure working with Jason, of course. And now back to you, Jason, to learn more about this year's shortlist.
Thanks so much, Pia. So this is the third year of the prize, and it's been incredibly encouraging and heartening to see just how impressive the pool of translators has been. The applications just keep getting better and better, and I think that's a really great sign for things to come in South Asian literature and translation. So very quickly, this year's jury consisted of Dina Chalabi, V.V. Ganeshanathan, Daisy Rockwell, Pia Sawhney, Aranava Sinha, Padma Vishwanathan, and me, Jason Grunebaum. So thanks to the jury for all of their hard work and attention to the submissions, and a special shout out to Shreya Shende for all of his behind the scenes work as prize submission manager. So the first shortlisted translator I'd like to introduce is Subhashree Beeman, who translated Saigon Puducherry by Krishna Nagarathinam from Tamil. Briefly, Subhashree is a translator working from the languages of Tamil and French into English. She's a winner of the 2024 Panhan Translation Grant and the 2024 SALT Alta Emerging Literary Translators Mentorship. Her work has been published by Words Without Borders, The White Review, Usawa Literary Magazine, Weaver's Literary Review, and Kala Chuvadu Magazine, etc. The jury wrote of Subhashree's translation. Linking French-controlled India with Indochina, now Vietnam, speaking in cities' voices as well as citizens, Saigon Puducherry explores an aspect of the European colonial era unusual for English fiction. Subhashree Beeman's lively translation brings us confidently into award-winning author and translator Krishna Nagarathinam's fresh, intriguing novel. Subha, over to you.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks, everyone, for being here. I'm going to read from my translation of Saigon Puducherry, a historical novel by Nagaratnam Krishna. Spanning a little over a century, the novel explores life under colonial rule in British India and French Indochina. It captures the personal and political upheavals, the caste and the class discrimination of the time, how the Second World War weakened European control and intensified independence movements in both India and Indochina. This well-researched novel features historical figures like Subhash Chandra Bose and Prushandhi. This translation will contribute to the broader discourse of colonial histories and will resonate with readers interested in world history, post-colonial studies, and literary fiction. So I'm just going to read from a chapter where two friends are discussing what happened after Gandhi's speech in Puducherry. Seshachalam asked his friend, "What do you think about Gandhi's speech?" Sadashivam replied, "We need to welcome his stand on rejecting untouchability. I completely agree with him on working towards eradicating communalism and caste discrimination following the French motto equality and fraternity. Rather than people like us, his speech must reach people like you. It must become a voice of the society rather than being a political campaign. What I'm angry about is he spoke about equality and fraternity, but did not open his mouth about the third French motto. Does liberty belong only to British India? Doesn't French India need it too?" Harijana Seva Sangam did not invite him to talk about freedom. You need to understand that. Colonial government wouldn't have allowed him into Puducherry had they suspected he would talk about it. It is important that he found a way to come here. For me to imagine that he brought along all the values he represents. All right then, when you return to your village, will you implement everything he said about caste and class eradication? Look me in the eye and answer me, Sadashivam asked his friend. No, even if he tried for 50 years, we would still remain the same. Just talking about it will not help. No matter whose speech we listen to, Gandhi or Periyar's, it doesn't matter how many speeches we listen to, when we return to our village and our homes, we will forget them all. Think about it. How did we become friends? Had you lived in Bagur and I in Puducherry, would it have been possible? We both lived on the same street in adjacent houses. Our young hearts didn't harbor distinctions like my father is a landowner, your father is a poor farmer. Friendship was born. If the Harijans are allowed to live in our neighborhoods, then this change may come to happen. Change can be brought only in this way. Do you know that Arvinder refused to meet Gandhi? Why bother with these internal politics? What about the problems at the factory? Every day is a 12-hour workday, 24 hours or 24 days of hard work a month. In this situation, the factory owners reduced our wages, claiming that there was no profit. Now that a pro-labor government has come to power in France, we are hoping that factory workers here will see a positive change. As soon as Sadashivam said this, a voice put an end to their conversation. Shall we get going, Master? Thank you.
Thank you, Subha. That was wonderful. So our next shortlisted translator is Mehdi Khawaja, who translated To Each Their Own Hell from Kashmiri by Akhtar Mohiuddin. Mehdi Khawaja is a freelance journalist and editor who has written for various Indian and international publications. Most recently, he has taught a course on Kashmiri language and literature at Ashoka University. He divides his time between writing and working with traditional Kashmiri crafts. The jury wrote of Mehdi's translation, the 1975 Kashmiri novel To Each Their Own Hell by Akhtar Mohiuddin is a taut, compelling meditation on love and its absence, populated by mysterious characters with names like X and Sheen and Daisy and Nancy. In Mehdi Khawaja's compelling translation, the propulsive voice of the narrative immediately grabs the reader's attention and won't let go. To Each Their Own Hell is an utterly unique narrative that evokes both the nihilism of No Exit or Madame Bovary and the ambiance of a noir thriller. Over to you, Mehdi.
Thank you, Jason. Hi, everyone. So I'm working, as Jason said, on a novel called Jahanmukh Panun Panun Nar, which I've translated as To Each Their Own Hell, written by the novelist Akhtar Mohiuddin in 1975. The novel was the first novel to be written in Kashmiri language, one of the first novels to be written in Kashmiri language, and will be hopefully the first Kashmiri novel to be translated and published in English. The novel primarily deals with the idea of corruption, both social as well as moral, but at the same time, also as Jason pointed out, is a universal meditation on love or the lack of it. I will read from the opening, a short passage from the opening chapter of the novel. Dog mauls man. This was not the news. Man mauls dog. This was the news that appeared in the headlines of the dailies, and people rushed in a clamor to buy such newspapers. In the old times, if dense clouds covered the sky and the rain turned the clouds amber, an outcry would erupt. An outcry would erupt that a murder had taken place somewhere, which was why nature was raging. However, in the era I am talking about, neither nature raged nor the newspaper owners, because even mauling a dog was no longer news. Now, people would eat a dog and boast about it. If rumors ever spread, for instance, of a Kartar Singh eating a dog slaughtered in a halal way, or of a Ghulam Rasool eating one slaughtered Jatka, that would bring out resentment in one of the communities, and news like this would only get published if a journalist had to exact political vengeance on either of these people. Sheen was a journalist of these times. He was well respected in the society. In the coffee house, he would gloat loudly, and to accommodate him at wedding functions, hosts would infringe the government's cap on the guest count. If Sheen so wished, he could make a victorious Kartar Singh lose an election or a battling Ghulam Rasool win one, because he was good at framing Kartar Singh as a halal-eating politician, even if he ate Jatka, or framing Ghulam Rasool as a Jatka-eating politician, even if he ate halal, as such journalism sustains secular democracy. That was why hearing Sheen's name gave anyone goosebumps, and why he was the Supreme Leader's most beloved journalist. On the day our story begins, X stood up in awe when Sheen entered the coffee house. Sheen walked towards X and greeted him with a handshake. X signaled to the waiter to serve coffee. Hello, Sheen, Sheen said, sinking into the chair. X stretched his teeth into a smile, but did not let out a giggle. He had not yet sat down when Nancy got up from her chair, sprinted through the tables, and sat beside Sheen. She extended her slender hand towards him and added with a chuckle, "Hello, Sheen. I was getting bored." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mehdi. Moving on to our third shortlisted translator. She's Ciara Mendis, who translated a collection of short stories, Grandmothers, Granddaughters, and Other Women by Kumudu Kumarasinghe from Sinhala. Ciara is a Sri Lankan writer who has won multiple awards, including the Staten Literary Award, and whose work appears in several international journals. She's a bilingual translator who translates into and out of both Sinhala and English. She holds an MA in English Studies and serves in the civil service. The jury wrote of Ciara's translation. Sinhala writer Kumudu Kumarasinghe looks into the lives of Sri Lankan women from the same marginalized section of society as herself to craft 6 short stories of resilience and wonder. The women in these stories respond to the harsh realities of their lives by imagining alternative, even magic ways of being, demonstrating how powerfully fiction can show us not only what is, but also what might be. Over to you, Ciara.
Let me first start by saying how grateful I am to be shortlisted. Thank you so much for this opportunity. So I would like to say why I selected this text for the translation. That is, first, because it positions itself between the two genres of short story and memoir, which I thought was very interesting. And it portrays strong, independent women who are unaware of the concept of feminism, but they are feminists in their own right. And the people in the urban shanties are largely underrepresented in Sri Lankan literature. And the setting of the book, which is 1970s and 80s in Sri Lanka, is a sociologically, economically, and politically interesting period because it was the time the open economy was introduced and the country went through several conflicts. And the other reason is because of the narrative style of the original text, which was spoken Sinhala. I could deliberately and unapologetically use Sri Lankan English, the variety of English we use in the country. So let me read an excerpt from a middle of a story. The daughter of Archie, the grandmother next door, lost her job at the coir mill. The coir company shut down. The rumor was that the company itself set fire to the mill to avoid paying bonus to the employees, but I'm not sure if it's true. With that, Archie's situation turned from bad to worse. The family fell out of the frying pan into the fire. Both her unemployed daughter and the son-in-law just stayed at home doing nothing, and the thought of feeding 6 mouths set Archie's head on fire. Archie faced the most difficult period of her life during these days, and it lasted for a seemingly endless time. Archie fought a tough battle with life. There wasn't a single rupee around the house. Even the kids' tills were eventually cracked. The family had just 1 meal a day. But even that became impossible with time. Therefore, the children stopped schooling and found odd jobs here and there to make money. Archie managed to prepare just 1 dish with green leaves along with some rice and fed the children at least 1 meal a day. She boiled jackfruit seeds or cooked plantain stems to keep them from going hungry. If she earned a couple of rupees by selling green leaves, she bought a loaf of bread with it and gave it to the kids with sugar. She would only have a cup of plain tea along with some sugar crystals in her palm. She told the children never to share the difficulties at home with another soul. There was no solution in the vicinity. The son-in-law had none at all. Therefore, Archie's daughter decided to go to the Middle East as a housemaid. A lot of women in our neighborhood went to the Middle East during that time. There was one woman who sent air tickets to other women and got them the same job at the same house where she worked. So Archie's daughter suddenly became extremely busy running here and there to get the passport made. Everything happened so swiftly, and finally, she went to the Middle East, just like that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ciara. That was wonderful. Our fourth shortlisted translator is Sumathy Sivamohan, who translated Moomin or The Believer and Other Stories by Shobha Sakti from Tamil. Sumathy Sivamohan is a professor in English at the University of Peradeniya. Her areas of interest are gender, dispossession, and the fraught question of nation. She is an internationally acclaimed filmmaker, dramatist, performer, poet, and translator. In 2011, she received the Premchand Fellowship awarded by the Sahitya Academy of India. Sumathy, over to you. Oh, you're back on video. Great. You're muted, Sumathy.
So my project is 10 stories, short stories by Shobha Shakti, and these stories are about, they're representative of his aware of across 4 decades. And they look at the very bloody civil war and the diasporic experience. They're singularly critical of nationalism, Tamil militant nationalism, but look at all the characters with empathy and compassion. So I will read my story, a section from the story, a short section, and this is about Tulip, or Tamilized as Tulip, who living in Paris, who is suddenly, who comes home and announces to his parents, Murugavel and Tachayani, that he has become a Muslim. So this is a young man, Sri Lankan Tamil origin. I mean, seems to be. And then, so I'll read from that section, and he announces this to his mother and father and his 2 sisters. I'll read it from a very short section. I'm now Muhammad Aslam. I'm now a Muslim. I have converted. The younger of the girls ran up to him and looked hard at his face. She hardly understood Tamil, so he said it again in French now. I'm Musalman now. Murugavel, the father, nodded and nodded again and bit on his lower lip. He walked slowly toward where they all stood. As Aslam moved to give him passage, Aslam is this young man, Murugavel came up to the dining table, and bidding all others to sit around the table, he drew a chair to sit down. The others took their places around the table. Why, son? Why? No, don't. We don't need this, he said, eyes down. Tachayani, the mother, sat frozen, only eyelids battered, giving off signs of life. The curve of a smile on the sister's lips might any moment slip down to the top of the table. Aslam looked around, scrutinizing each face. When he caught the shadow of a smile on the sisters' faces, he allowed himself to grow one in return. Murugavel, the father, was tearing up. Tachayani sniffled. Again, looking up at Aslam, Murugavel, with deliberation, started speaking. Son, what wrong did we do? Did we lapse in our duties to you? Speak. We wanted the best for you. Do some job, any job, odd or even, whatever, and make good in this world. We didn't ask for anything else. There's work at the carpenter shop where Jafar works. He will take me on Monday to this place, answered Aslam. His eyes blinked. Who is Jafar? Asked Murugavel. A friend, Algerian boy. So he asked you to convert? Why? You think I have no mind of my own? This is God's calling, said Aslam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sumathy. And I apologize because I neglected to read the jury citation for your translation. So if you'll allow me to read that now. The jury wrote of Sumathy's translation that Shobha Shakti is a groundbreaking Sri Lankan Tamil writer now living in France. In this vivid translation of Moomin or the Believer and other stories, Sumathy Sivamohan brings Shobha Shakti's forceful prose and distinctive vision to life with a deep understanding of the political and social context. The brilliant title story engages with the surprising family history of a young Tamil-speaking man who converts to Islam. Like so much of Shobha Shakti's work, it insists on addressing aspects of the past some have tried to erase. Okay, and we are moving on to our final shortlisted translator. So Dr. Punarvasu Joshi for his translation of Manoj Kumar Pandey's The Modern Tales of a Golden Country, translated from Hindi. Dr. Punarvasu Joshi has a PhD in electrical engineering from Arizona State University. A nanotechnology researcher turned translator, he has translated 40 Hindi short stories for a 2-volume anthology entitled A Journey in Time. His recent translation is the novel The Madhouse, which came out in January 2025. And the jury citation of Punarvasu's translation: contemporary Hindi writer Manoj Pandey's satiric folkloric stories of the narcissistic king of the Golden Country and his coterie of enablers are searing and delightful, while Punarvasu Joshi's urgent English translation is a timely enactment of how reality can buckle beneath raw power in the universal battleground of language. Punarvasu?
Thank you, Jason. Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Piaji, and thank you, Armory Square team, for shortlisting my work. And thank you, Himal, Southasian, for giving us this platform. And lastly, congratulations to all my fellow shortlisted translators. It was great hearing you. So when the authoritarianism takes over, the very first casualty is truth. And that's when writers and poets take refuge in allegory. And Manoj Kumar Pandey's collection of short stories, 13 stories, use allegory to tell truth to the power. The story which I'm going to read from is, I'm going to read a very short paragraph. And the story is titled, A Letter from the Farmer Suicide Commission. It addresses the issue of rural farmers committing suicide through dark satire. The story uses irony, grotesque exaggeration, and a for-official tone to reflect systematic apathy and authoritarian callousness. The narrative strategy denies, distorts, and trivializes genuine suffering. It's deserving and effective, turns absurd logic or bureaucratic gaslighting into scathing mirror. And I'll read a very brief paragraph. So this is a letter written by an official to His Excellency, the King. First of all, we tried to see what are the criteria of being a real farmer. We began by watching all the Indian and foreign films made about farmers. Thereafter, we turned over the pages and pages of literature written in all the Indian languages with farmers as their central focus. We studied the images of farmers in countries' textbooks once again, and in the end, we came up with a few metrics which can form the basis of identification of farmers. And this is what we concluded. Anyone without gunk in his eyes is not a farmer. The one who travels in the sleeper class on the train is definitely not a farmer. The one who travels in the AC class is surely devoid of any possibility of being a farmer at any cost. He certainly must be getting funded from some anti-national elements. The reality is that the farmer never even boards the general compartment of a train. He's never in the need to go very far. And even if he has to go far, for some reason, he either goes on foot or by his trusted will of God.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our shortlisted translators. That was really amazing. And now I'm super excited to hand it over to Pia for the big prize announcement. Pia, take it away.
Thank you, Jason. It was such a pleasure and a joy to hear excerpts from our shortlist today. I hope you'll all pursue the work that these finalists have endured long hours to produce. And it's my distinct pleasure again to recognize the special jury mention this year. It's a new category that we've identified because the entries were sterling, and we couldn't help but pick out one more excerpt than we normally do to recognize the industry that went into this project. So this year's special jury mention goes to Saigon Puducherry by Nagaritham Krishna from the Tamil language, translated by Subhashree Beeman. Congratulations, Subhashree.
Thank you. It's amazing. Thank you so much. So grateful for all the judges and my panelists and everyone. Thank you so much. So happy. Thanks, Pia.
Thank you, and we look forward to seeing the work progress, and we've enjoyed reading what we've seen so far. So hopefully you'll have a chance to share more of it with the world.
Definitely.
And now, yes, for our final winning entry, this was a winner that we deliberated on for some time. It's an entry that captures a host of literary traditions, and we were quite excited this year to recognize for the very first time the very first Kashmiri book to come into translation into English, To Each Their Own Hell by Akhtar Mohideen, translated by Mehdi Khawaja. Congratulations, Mehdi. This is a profound announcement for us and hopefully for you as well.
Thank you, Pia, and thank you, Jason. I wasn't expecting this, so I don't have anything ready to say. But I think I should take this moment to acknowledge the support of people without whom I couldn't have done this. First of all, my friend Muntaha, who's here. Also, Shimona Roy at Ashoka, who informed me about the prize. I wouldn't have applied otherwise. And of course, Haris, who is the current copyright holder of the novel, the grandson of the writer, and many more. Hopefully, I'll get time to acknowledge the support of many other people. But yeah, I'm at a loss of words. Thank you very much, and congratulations to all the other shortlisted translators. Looking forward to read all your works. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm at a loss of words.
We are as well. We couldn't be prouder, and we hail all your accomplishments as an educator, as a craftsman, as somebody speaking for a region of the world that has far too long been overlooked. So in a host of ways, our anticipation and our aspiration is that Mohideen's work gets more widely read and gets a broader reception. Thank you.
Thanks, Pia. Thanks, everyone, again. This was incredible. So look out for all of the shortlisted and jury mention and winner excerpts coming up in Words Without Borders. And we'll be tweeting about that. So please follow us on Twitter. And this was just such an amazing year. And there was just so many incredible translations where we're just really thrilled to be able to showcase everyone's work, hard work, and amazing literary ventriloquism. Let me hand it back over to Anthony. Let me hand it over to you. Thank you again so much for allowing us to present the prize.
Yeah, it was great getting to hear everyone's readings and translations. Congratulations to all the candidates. I had a great time listening to your stories. Yeah, and thank you to everyone for attending. That will conclude our second event for Himal Fiction Fest. Be sure to check out the 2 remaining stories that we have to publish on speculative fiction. and to catch more news from the Armory Square Prize. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending tonight.